This presentation is on doing historical research. All historical inquiry begins with a question that asks why or how things happened in the past. Or historians ask, so what? Reflective questions that seek meaning. Who, what, where, when questions are important to establish context, but do not offer deep or interesting historical conclusions. The bottom line is, all history begins with asking a question, and the trick to doing good historical work is to ask good analytical questions from the start. Here are some examples of the differences between analytical historical questions and descriptive historical questions. Here is a claim. Women were the primary targets of the European witch hunts. If you wanted to evaluate this claim that women were the primary targets of the European witch hunts, good historical questions to ask might include, why was witchcraft a gendered phenomenon? Or, what does this tell us about gender identity in early modern Europe? Descriptive questions that are helpful in establishing context but do not get to the deeper meaning of what actually happened might include, where did the witch hunts occur? When did the witch hunts begin and end? How many people were accused of witchcraft? The bottom line is that historians use both types of questions together. We need to know the answers to the who, what, where, when questions to understand the context of our so what, how, and why questions. Remember, historians create the past through the questions we ask. We do not discover it. Historians use two types of sources to learn about the past, primary and secondary. Primary sources were created at the time of our historical inquiry. For example, law codes, diaries, trial records, philosophical or theological tracts, music, etc. are good examples. Secondary sources are written by historians about our research topic. For example, books or journal articles written about the witch hunts, or, more specifically, books or journal articles written about a specific component of the witch hunts, whether that be the legal history, the history of magic, or the history of gender. Analyzing historical sources requires specific methodology. When you look at primary sources, you must keep several things in mind. First off, who wrote the source? When and where was it written? What does the source say? What is its thesis? What perspective does the source reflect? How does the source speak to your historical question? When you're using secondary sources, you have to think about what the scholar says about your historical question. And also, how does he or she fit into the broader scholarly conversation about your historical question? The key to good historical research is to use the conclusions you draw from analyzing your primary source in conjunction with the conclusions you draw from what other scholars are saying about your research topic. In order to better explain the process of historical research, I've created something that I call the history pyramid. The history pyramid shows the relationship between your question or thesis and the historical context, primary evidence, and secondary evidence. Basically, since all historical inquiry begins with a question, you begin here with your very strong analytical question about a how or why something happened in the past. Then you look at the historical context to see what exactly happened. So this is step 2. After you have a good sense of what happened, you need to go and start looking at primary source material to get a very clear sense of how people in the past were either contributing or reflecting on what was going around them. After you have a good sense of what was going on in the past, then you consult specialized secondary sources written by historians to see what they think happened in the past. In the end, your job as budding historians is to synthesize the historical context, primary evidence, and secondary sources together to come up with an answer or your thesis to your question.